You're watching Reality Check. Just 7 days left in the American elections, and is it heading for a photo finish? The polls do show Joe Biden with a 10 percentage point lead over Donald Trump. This is from a CNN poll of polls from last week, which shows Trump trailing at 42% to Biden's 52%. But as we know from 2016, the polls can get it wrong. In a close finish, every vote is likely to count, and both sides have reached out to Indian American voters like never before. Now, Indian Americans are not a big number as a vote bank, but every vote counts. At the moment, though, two recent surveys show that Indian Americans still overwhelmingly favor Biden/the Democrats by about 70 to 30, 70 in favor of Biden, 30 to Trump, despite Trump's presence at mega events like Howdy Modi, the big event in Texas, and also, of course, the mega Modi-Trump rally in Ahmedabad earlier this year. All right, joining me tonight on Reality Check, we have with us Marilyn Carson. She's the co-chair, Indian Voices for Trump, and facing off against Neha Dewan, National Director, South Asians for Biden. Also with us, Suketu Mehta, author most recently of This Land is My Land, An Immigrant's Manifesto, Associate Professor at New York University, and Suhasini Haidar, National Editor and Diplomatic Affairs Editor, The Hindu. Marilyn Carson, let me start with you. Great to have you on the show. Now, are you worried? Because, President Trump is trailing not just in the overall polls by 10 percentage points, but also, as we just pointed out, overwhelmingly when it comes to South Asian/Indian voters. It's still very much leaning towards Mr. Biden.
Well, first, thanks for having me here. It's great to be here. No, I'm not worried. The poll, like you mentioned, the polls in 2016 showed the same thing, right? President Trump wasn't leading, but who won that? And then we're looking at the rallies. I personally have been on the campaign trail, and I see the enormous amount of support that is for President Trump. So no, I'm not worried. I was actually at the Indian Voices for Trump, and we did something in North Carolina. We did something in Pennsylvania with Nikki Haley. I mean, there is a tremendous amount of support, and it also depends on what survey you're looking at. Last time, API just made a survey that there's 28% of Indian Americans have turned to Trump in 2020, as opposed to 16% in 2016. So there's definitely a group, and there is a focus right now, especially because Indian Americans are a very important part of where how we're standing up for policies.
Right. No, Marilyn, you're right that the AAPI survey does show 66% to Biden, 28% to Trump, which is a 12 percentage point increase. But the more recent Indian American Attitude survey says 70 to 22. But even, Marilyn, if we accept the earlier number, 66 to 28 is still a huge lead for Joe Biden. Are you seriously suggesting that the Trump campaign has made inroads into Indian Americans? Because the evidence doesn't seem to suggest that.
I think we have, especially the relationship that Trump is focused on with Modi. And the Howdy Modi event in Texas was incredible. Trump visiting right before the COVID pandemic, Trump visiting India. All of these adds to it, right? And when you look at who is going to be a better fit for and support, better fit for Indians and India, it's Trump and presidency. So yes, and again, in the grassroots, I see more on the ground. I see more support for Trump than what the media is portraying.
Neha Dewan, South Asians for Biden. Would you like to respond?
Yeah, I think that just actually couldn't be further from the truth. Just a few days ago, we saw, it's not about what the media, we actually saw in the presidential debates where President Trump called India filthy. It's great to host these rallies and shake hands, but, as we've seen, he's also revoked India's preferential trade status. There's been no trade deals with India. He's also blocked H-1B applications, which disproportionately affect Indians. There's been a rise of hate crimes in the South Asian community, in the Indian American community. When our mandirs are vandalized, there's no tweets about it, but, he's happy to plow through a series of protesters to hold the Bible up for photo ops. So you got to look at the actions and not necessarily words and photo ops, because, the way that he said India is filthy with the disdain in his voice, you don't say that about a friend's house. So in terms of a better fit, you have Vice President Biden, who in 2006 said that in 2020, the greatest partnership is going to be that between India and the United States. He helped broker the U.S. India civil nuclear agreement back in 2008 as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee
Right.
bilaterally, right, across the aisle. So when you're talking about a better fit, Joe Biden is talking about he's going to remove the H-1B caps. He's okay with, family-based migration,
Sure.
opportunities for small businesses, which the
Right.
Indian American community here has suffered immensely. So, it's great to shake hands and have photo ops, but really, in
Okay,
terms
you're
of
saying it's not
substantively what's going to
substantive.
happen,
Okay. Well, actually,
sorry?
I was planning to get into the whole idea of who's a better fit for India as opposed to Indian Americans a little later, because the poll, one of the polls actually shows that Indian Americans consider US-India relations at the lowest in terms of their priorities when it comes to what are the top issues for them. But I just want to get Marilyn a quick chance to rebut before I move on, specifically to the point, Marilyn, about now President Trump repeatedly, the second time, in fact, in his debates, where he took a swipe at India. The first time he said India is amongst the countries that fudges its coronavirus figures. And in the last debate, as was just pointed out, he said India is filthy.
Look, the data we're getting from across the world. I mean, I don't think we're getting clean data here. But I do want to touch on something. She said there's been destruction of temples and things like that. Well, who is standing up for law and order here? It's not Biden. Biden sat in, when it's riots across the country,
Okay,
Biden's sitting in his basement,
Marilyn,
right? So, I mean,
Marilyn,
let's
you're
talk.
deflecting.
I mean, if we're gonna,
I'm sorry to jump in. I'm on President Trump's little swipe at India. Do you think that was a mistake? He shouldn't have done it?
I'm not. I can't speak to why he said that. But I do agree with him on the data is skewed, right? I don't think we're getting clean data, but that's something that we're seeing internally,
Okay.
that we're not getting clean data from there. So that's.
Okay.
I mean, I can't say anything else about that.
Okay. Suketu Mehta, well-known Trump supporter. I'm just kidding. Suketu Mehta.
My man from
Suketu Mehta, what, from your vantage, are you seeing any shift at all in attitudes of South Asian voters towards Trump? And overall, are you feeling any 2016 jitters about what's going to happen on the 3rd?
Look, Vasu, I spoke to you in 2016, and I remember, thinking that Hillary was going to be Durga Mata, and she was going to slay Mahishasur, and all would be well. And I was wrong, as were lots of journalists. This time around, lots of us are sort of bedwetting, thinking that the same thing might happen. So we are not completely confident, but we're reasonably confident. And the reason we're confident is that 64 million Americans have already voted.
That's right.
So the election might already have been decided, particularly in the battleground states. And those voters tend to be overwhelmingly Democratic. So yes, in 8 days from now, I think I'm going to be dancing in the streets of North Carolina, where I'm living right now. I just voted last week. And among not just the Indian American community, but Americans in general,
Right.
there really is this feeling that we want our long national nightmare to come
Right.
to an end.
Okay, do send us that video of you dancing if indeed that's how it all ends up. But in case that, I'm not going to ask you what you're going to do in case he does win, but quickly about my question about South Asian voters. Are you sensing any shift at all, as Marilyn Carson is suggesting, towards Trump, towards the Republicans?
Look, even in 2016, 87% of Indian Americans voted for Hillary. And this year, I think the numbers might even be higher. Among the South Asians I know, even the Modi supporters, it's interesting. There are people who will, like many of my relatives, Gujarati relatives, support Modi, but also detest Trump. And they detest Trump because he is ultimately racist to his core. He does not like Indians. He has said many times that the kind of immigrants he wants are Nordic immigrants, Norwegians, not Indians. We are from, what he called the S-hole countries. He has called India filthy. he makes no secret of his disdain for us, and particularly when it comes to the H-1Bs. This is something that is incredibly important to Indian Americans. He and his utterly racist immigration advisor, Stephen Miller, have almost eliminated the H-1Bs, and this is something that Indian Americans feel keenly. So, we don't like him because he's bad for India, he's bad for Indian Americans, and most of all, because he's bad for America. We have to live here, and we're living in the middle of a pandemic which he's done nothing to stop. 200,000 dead people. I see dead people, Vasu. And that's why I think that people will ultimately vote him out.
Okay. So, Asni Heather, from India's point of view, because we already seem to have gotten to that earlier in the debate about who's actually better placed to serve India's interests, we've seen, would you say that with Trump, regardless of those comments that he made in the debates, that it has been mixed, or has it largely been a position or positions he's taken that India would rather hope that there is a change of guard?
Well, to be honest, when it comes to Mr. Trump's comments about India's role in terms of climate change and in terms of pollution levels and all the rest of that, his stand has not changed since 2017 when he came to power. If you hear the statements he made when he was pulling out of the Paris Accord, for example, in June 2017, he said pretty much the same thing about India, big polluter, that kind of thing. In terms of who's better for India, Trump or Biden, I'd say Trump-Biden. I mean, in a sense, I don't think over the last 20 years, it has really mattered much in terms of policy. When it comes to the US, there's been a kind of year-on-year increase, a strengthening of ties. India has chosen to perhaps, put aside the kind of comments that Mr. Trump makes, because eventually what matters is on the subjects, on the policy itself. I think there are 4 areas where India needs to watch closely, if at all. One is the strategic area where I don't think there will be a shift, and this 2+2 meeting seems to show that, it will continue. I don't think the Democrats will roll back any of the strategics closely in between the two countries. The political sphere is where they do have to think, because the Democrats perhaps don't turn a blind eye and don't completely ignore concerns about internal matters of other countries. The way the Republicans have. And so we've already seen statements being made about India's internal politics by the Democrats. And I think trade and people-to-people ties are the other places to watch closely. People-to-people ties, of course, include students and visas and all that.
Marilyn, do you want to just come in on Suketu's point that it's not just about...
I would actually like to comment on something.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a chance, Marilyn. Let me just complete my question, and I'll certainly give you a chance. But I want to first just get you specifically on Suketu's point that regardless of, whether he's specifically targeting South Asians or not, that President Trump is racist. Would you agree that he's racist?
I'm so glad you're asking me that. I'm really glad you're asking me that. First of all, I don't see that racism on him. I'm very involved in the campaign. There are a lot of minorities. I'm not just talking about Asian American Indians here, but I'm talking about a lot of minorities that support him, and there's a reason why. He's been doing a lot for the minority community. And let's talk about Biden here. Here's the hypocrisy that I have a hard time with Democrats in general. Have we even seen the video where Biden says, so you can't go into a 7-Eleven and Dunkin' Donuts if you don't have a slight accent? That's the kind of hypocrisy. I'm married to an African American, and last time he said, if you don't vote for Democrats, you ain't black. I mean, those are the kind of comments that come out of Biden. This was recent.
Okay, let me get...
Right? So how are we so hypocritical to pointing fingers at
Marilyn,
Trump who's done a lot for the minority community?
Okay, Marilyn, I'm certainly going to take that to Neha Devan, but when you say that President Trump is not racist, when you say you look at his campaign, but what about the things he said? As Suketu said, one of the things he said, that famous comment about S-hole countries. Why are we having people from S-hole countries? He asked Ilhan Omar, who's a person of color, member of Congress, to go back to her country. He's hedged when it comes to outright condemning white supremacists. The examples are endless. The examples are endless. Are these not clear? Is this not clear evidence of someone who's racist?
Here are people who have come to this country, looking for opportunities. America is still a great country. People still want to immigrate here because there's a reason for it, right? We are a great country. We have a land, we're full of land of opportunities.
Sure.
There are people like Ilhan Omar that come over here, haven't been given this opportunity to be in the top echelons of society here. And here she is, calling America terrible. She makes it sound like this is the worst place that she could possibly be in. And then, thinks that
isn't she allowed to do that as an American citizen?
I can't disagree with the president. She's so unhappy over here. Maybe she should go back. I can't disagree with him on saying that. So one thing about President Trump is, look, he's going to call it as he sees it. And I don't think that's racist to say, if you hate this country so much, right? That's how I see it.
Okay. Neha Dewan.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely not the case, right? I mean, she's here. She became a citizen.
That's true, by the way. Suhasini is right. It does sound familiar. Sorry, Neha Dewan, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, she became a U.S. citizen. She decided to, dedicate her life to public service, and she hates this country so much. No, she's actually trying to make this a better place. And if our president of this country is not even condemning white supremacy, what are you left with? It doesn't make her bad or, for wanting to make this country a better place and rid people of racists such as him. I mean, let's not forget that President Trump was also after President Obama for his birth certificate, right? Like, why? I mean, why is that? Have we done that before? No, because he was black. I mean, this is just, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, there's endless accounts of racism. I mean, the fact that, yes, he wants people from Nordic countries, people from places such as India. India is not on his radar. Indian Americans are not on his radar.
Okay. Guys, one at a time. No one will be able to hear otherwise. Suketu Mehta, here's the thing. Regardless of the president's record and regardless of whatever one's personal wishes might be, the fact is that it is still somewhat astounding to those of us watching from the outside that given everything that's happened with the economy, with this handling of the virus, so on and so forth, the gap is still not that wide. Some would say 10 percentage points is significant, but we've seen that gap close before. Explain that. Explain the fact that there are still a substantial number of Americans who still strongly support him, and perhaps more might get added on as we go along.
Yeah, there are people who support him, and a lot of these people are working class whites who are afraid that this country is slipping away from their grasp. This country is going to be majority minority by the year 2044. And they are afraid that it's going to be people like us who will dominate them. So a lot of this, really, the reason people vote for him is based on race. And also he's been good at playing to the anxieties of working class whites. But I don't think in this election, this is not 2016, because the differences in the battleground states, and this is what many people around the world don't understand about America, that ultimately my vote in New York doesn't matter because it's a Democratic state. My vote in North Carolina matters because it's evenly split. And it's really about 8 battleground states that it'll come down to. And the state level polls this time, they've gotten much better than 2016. Okay. So we've got a far better indication that Biden might win, and he might win in a landslide, and the Senate might also go back to Democrats.
Suhasini, very quickly towards the end, that, in a sense, the ruling establishment here did commit unusually towards backing Trump / the Republicans. In the event that Biden does manage to win, is there some kind of behind the scenes anxiety or panic in the in the government foreign policy establishment?
Well, certainly a lot of investment has gone in very personally to Mr. Trump. If you look at the Howdy Modi event in Houston, Mr. Modi saying, once again, ab ki baar Trump Sarkar, although he was referring to the previous election, they later clarified the fact that in an election year, we invited the US president to India, held that joint rally with him. The fact that we had the 2+2 exactly 1 week before elections, when it's clear that whatever assurances we are given will have to be doubled up by whoever comes to power after the elections as well. There's no question that the government at present in India has invested personally in Mr. Trump. And it would be, it would hope perhaps to make, to be able to leverage that a little longer if Mr. Trump wins. However,
Yes.
I would guess that if in the event, and we're reading the polls, I'm sure the government is reading these polls too.
Yes.
That with the chance that Mr. Biden might actually win, I'm sure already the embassy in the U.S., the government is
reaching out.
making its reach out to the
Okay.
Democrat side as well.
Okay, yes, got to make sure that we hedge our bets, don't end up taking just one side. But that's all the time we have. Thank you all for joining us. It's been fascinating. We will come back to this story. And thank you so much for watching Reality Check from all of us here. Good night.